Hello, I'm Raj Chengappa of India Today, and your host for Nothing But the Truth. Every week, we will deal with key issues and bring you perspectives and clarities as to why these matter to you and what is the one clear truth. In this episode, we will deal with Imran Khan and his downfall as Pakistan's Prime Minister. But before we get into the details as to why Imran Khan went, let me give you a brief recap. We all know Imran Khan as one of the cricket's greatest all-rounders. But what is little known is that he's not a political novice. Soon after he gave up cricket, he entered philanthropy, where he built his mother's cancer hospital, and then formed a party called the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. He then fought for 2 decades valiant political battles before he emerged as Prime Minister in July 2018. Now, in that election, his party, the PTI, emerged as the single largest party. He had got much less than the 172 required, and he made that numbers up with having 7 coalition partners, and they had a very fragile and tenuous government. I also know Imran Khan during both as a cricketer and a politician. I had watched him play the World Cup in 1992, where he became a legend, and he won for Pakistan the World Cup. I've also interviewed him as a politician, and at every stage, he spoke with a great deal of candor and forcefulness. When he was elected Prime Minister, he said he would bring a Naya Pakistan, a vastly different change from what their regimes were there before. He promised that he would create 10 million jobs and also 5 million cheap housing units. And he said he would get rid of corruption. 3.5 years later, that promise remains a mirage. Imran Khan, in a series of events that has happened recently, there was a no confidence motion against him by the opposition, and then he bowled a googly where he dissolved the assembly and resigned as Prime Minister and wanted fresh elections. The Supreme Court was forced to step in and arbitrate on a very politically divisive issue. But the big questions remain. Why did Imran Khan, who came with so much promise, go down the way he did? What were the big reasons that were there? And I've looked at that issue, and there are 4 major reasons that I will talk about. So let's deal with the first major reason for Imran Khan's downfall, and that is his domineering personality. On the cricket field, that was great. But when it came to politics, you required a vastly different skill. Imran Khan as captain was outstanding. Imran Khan as politician, there were a lot of heartburn from his allies. And that would start the beginning of the problem. Because Imran Khan was hugely popular, not just for his cricket, but subsequently for his politics as well. And he began to assume a larger-than-life sense of his self. He became very imperious in the way he dealt with people. He was arrogant. And he then, of course, did one of the most surprising things, that just before the elections, he married for the 3rd time. He married Bushra Menaka, who he said was his spiritual guide and a faith healer. And this raised a lot of eyebrows. Many felt that she was influencing his political decisions. And Imran Khan began to make a lot of decisions. Whatever the truth about his wife was and whether she was advising him, that's a different matter. We don't know that. But he began to make a lot of political decisions that began to hurt him. And that's the second big reason for the downfall that happened. Among the decisions that would in some ways be his undoing was the appointment of the Chief Minister of Punjab. Now, Pakistan's Punjab is a bit like UP, but even more important. In the National Assembly, it accounts for 44% of the seats. To win Punjab, you have to do well in the province, Punjab province, and an election was held simultaneously with the general election, and the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf came with actually being again the single largest party, had to form a coalition government. Imran Khan then appointed a chief minister, Usman Buzdar, who was a complete lightweight. People were surprised by his appointment. He was in fact a defector of various parties and joined the PTI, Imran's party, only just before the elections. Now, in Punjab, just before Buzdar was there was Shahbaz Sharif, who was the chief minister from the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz. He was an outstanding performer. In contrast, Buzdar soon ran into issues in dealing with Punjab. And Imran Khan finally had to sack him as chief minister only when his central government was in danger. And that was just too late. That brings me to the third reason as to Imran's downfall. But before I go into the details of the third reason, I would like to give you a quote from Mushahid Hussain, a very well-known former journalist and politician now. And he has watched many prime ministers come and go in Pakistan. And he said the real problem with Imran Khan was that he was not able to build a good team. He had turned arrogant. He was not listening to various people and was taking unnecessary battles. He even said that he behaved more like the opposition leader rather than the prime minister. Now, this may be true or not, and I'm sure Imran Khan supporters will say that was certainly not true, but that had a bearing in the way he started dealing with major issues. And among them was the economy. Now, to be fair to Imran Khan, that before he took over as prime minister, the economy was in not a good shape at all. Almost similar to what when Prime Minister Narendra Modi took over for the first time as Prime Minister of India, the economy was just as bad. Growth had slowed, there was a balance of payment crisis, and inflation was going up, and there was unemployment. Now, Imran Khan suddenly realized that when he took over, one of his major problems was that there was not enough money and Pakistan was heading to the brink of bankruptcy. So he reached out to friends, countries that had helped Pakistan in the past. China, one of them. China gave him $6 billion. Saudi Arabia, another friend of Pakistan, gave $2 billion. But he soon found that wasn't enough. So he had to approach the International Monetary Fund, IMF. Now, he was against approaching this. And in fact, when he took over as Prime Minister, he made a public speech that Pakistan should be standing on its own feet. But he had to eat his words. He went to the IMF. He took a $6 billion loan. They gave it in July 2019, 1 year after he became Prime Minister. And the IMF, as we all know, brings in a lot of conditions before it gives you the money. Now, Pakistan, it's not that Pakistan had, this is the first time that Pakistan was going to the IMF. As a matter of fact, it's gone almost 22 times since independence to the IMF. That's how bad its economy has been. And Imran Khan inherited that. But when he took that, there were a lot of restrictions, including cutting of subsidies and power tariffs and things like that, that began to hurt the common man. Then came COVID. And as you know, it has devastated all economies across the world, including India, with Pakistan being no exception. So whatever Imran Khan was doing, it began to be completely undone by COVID. As it happened in India, degrowth happened. With that, the problems, though to his credit, Imran Khan actually handled the COVID pandemic well for his country. He released a whole lot of money, welfare measures that brought relief to the poor, and he gave a stimulus to the economy. But the economy was in such deep trouble that it was not able to recover once it came, though GDP growth is up, but inflation is running at 10%. You have a balance of payment crisis again building for it. You have your fiscal deficit that is very high, and the debt is so high that he's not able to service it and will have to borrow more. That will lead to more problems. And I'm simplifying things. There are very serious issues that the economy faces, and it is hemorrhaging. And that is one of the reasons why people began to become unhappy. And this was a chance that the opposition saw to hit back at Imran Khan, and they began to use that opportunity. And there was another, and that is the fourth big reason that was Imran Khan's downfall, which I will deal with, which was the most critical reason that led finally to having him putting his resignation as Prime Minister. Now, the fourth big reason was in many respects the most important, because the euphoria that Imran Khan came with, that he was going to become a Naya Pakistan, he would bring change, he would bring jobs, all that had vanished, and in its place, unrest happened. Now, that is when the opposition began to step in, the army, the Pakistani army, which is the most powerful entity in Pakistan, began to have second thoughts about Imran Khan's leadership. Now, the blunder that Imran Khan began to take was that he started confronting the army. And I'll give you some of the incidents that happened. But what is very important is that every prime minister in Pakistan that has confronted the army has met his or her nemesis. They have never been able to win that battle. Now, when Imran Khan was elected, he was actually seen as someone that the army had backed. In fact, people mockingly said that Imran Khan was a selected prime minister and not an elected one. In this first 100 days, and in fact, I'd gone to Islamabad and Lahore there, and when we held a press conference, I was sitting there when he said, the army and I are on the same page. But as things progressed, they seemed to be reading from different chapters. Because the problem began soon after its major policy triumph in Afghanistan, where the Taliban returned. The ISI chief at that time was Lieutenant General Faiz Hamid. He sort of emerged as a hero of that by appearing in public in Kabul and negotiating for a change. Now, soon after that, the army chief, General Qamar Bajwa, decided that he would shift Hamid away from ISI to another corps. Imran Khan, as Prime Minister, had to pass those orders. But strangely enough, and unprecedented, he held those orders for 5 weeks. And he finally, only after pressure, acceded it. That was the beginning of the rift between the general, the army, and Imran Khan. And the army, once it decided that Imran Khan was not playing according to its book, said it would now remain neutral when there is a political dispute. So the opposition united and became emboldened, and they moved to a no-confidence motion. Now, Imran Khan thought that the army would support him, but when he found that there was no support, he in fact publicly complained that there is, indirectly to the army, because he couldn't say it directly, that only animals remain neutral, but everyone knew what he was meaning. And as the political crisis developed, all his allies and his own party men began to desert. And then Imran Khan, when just on the day, on April 3rd, when the no-confidence motion was there, like a good cricketer, he bowled a googly. Instead of going for a no-confidence motion, he alleged that there was a conspiracy to oust him, that the US was behind it, and the opposition was behind it, and they were acting against the Constitution. The Speaker dismissed the no-confidence motion. Imran Khan then went to the President, put in his papers, and said, dissolve the Assembly and hold fresh elections. Of course, the big question remains, is it game over for Imran Khan?